In order to understand how life originated on Earth, we have to understand how Earth itself originated. We also have to understand the structure of Earth's crust so that we can figure out how fossils and other signs of life that we find buried in the rock relate to each other. Our objectives in this lecture are to explain the hypothesis that scientists have about early Earth, to describe the theory of plate tectonics, list the processes that change rock over time, explain how to date events in Earth's history, and describe how the geologic timescale was established and its major divisions. What was early Earth like? Earth was not always the moderate and habitable planet it is today. In its earliest days, Earth was scorching hot and without an atmosphere or water. If life originated early on, it was wiped out by the terrible conditions. Earth formed at the same time as all the other planets. The history of Earth is part of the history of the solar system. Earth came together in a process called accretion from the cloud of dust and gas known as the solar nebula, nearly 4.6 billion years ago, the same time the Sun and the rest of the solar system formed. Gravity caused small bodies of rock and metal orbiting the proto-sun to smash together to create larger bodies. Over time, the planetoids got larger and larger until they became planets. When Earth first came together, it was really hot, hot enough to melt the metal elements that it contained. Earth was so hot for three reasons. The first was gravitational contraction. As small bodies of rock and metal accreted, the planet grew larger and more massive. Gravity within such an enormous body squeezes the metal in its interior so hard that the pressure swells. As Earth's internal pressure grew, its temperature also rose. The second reason that Earth was so hot was because of radioactive decay. Radioactive decay releases heat, and early in the planet's history, there were many radioactive elements with short half-lives. These elements long ago decayed into stable materials, but they were responsible for the release of enormous amounts of heat in the beginning. The third reason for early Earth's heat was bombardment. Ancient impact craters found on the moon and inner planets indicate that asteroid impacts were common in the early solar system. Earth was struck so much in its first 500 million years that the heat was intense. Very few large objects have struck the planet in the past many hundreds of millions of years. When Earth was entirely molten, gravity drew denser elements to the center and lighter elements rose to the surface. The separation of Earth into layers based on density is known as differentiation. The densest material moved to the center to create the planet's dense metallic core. Just like if you put something heavy in water, it's going to sink quickly. The heaviest elements sank to the middle of the Earth. Materials that are intermediate in density became part of the mantle. If we could cut Earth open, we'd see the inner core at the center, then the outer core, the mantle in the middle, and the crust on the outside. If you're talking about plates, though, there's this brittle lithosphere riding on the plastic asthenosphere. Core, mantle, and crust are divisions based on composition. The core is mostly iron metal. The core makes up about 31% of the Earth. The mantle is composed of hot rock. It represents about 68% of Earth's mass. The crust is less than 1% of Earth by mass. The two types are oceanic crust and continental crust. Continental crust is made of lighter rock than oceanic crust. That's why it floats higher on the Earth. Lithosphere and asthenosphere are divisions based not on composition, but on mechanical properties. What do those layers do? The lithosphere is composed of both the crust and the portion of the upper mantle, and it behaves as a brittle, rigid solid. Litho means rock. The lithosphere is made mostly of solid rock. The asthenosphere is partially molten upper mantle material and behaves plastically. That means it's flexible. It can flow. The Earth has changed greatly over time. That even includes the oceans and land masses, thanks to a phenomenon called plate tectonics. There are plates of lithosphere. Remember, the lithosphere is the outermost part of the Earth. It's made mostly of solid rock that floats on top of the mantle. That lithosphere is broken up into plates, which are labeled in the diagram, that move based on the movement of the Earth's mantle. The mantle is constantly moving underneath the lithosphere, and when the mantle moves, it pushes the lithosphere around, pushes the plates of the lithosphere around. Where plates move apart, mid-ocean ridges are formed when hot magma upwells from the mantle and cools. Think about a crack forming in the lithosphere. Magma comes up from the mantle and squeezes out onto the surface of the Earth. When it cools down, it becomes solid, it becomes part of the lithosphere. There are two mid-ocean ridges along the west coast of the United States. When plates collide, when they run into each other, parts of the lithosphere are either pushed up to form mountains or forced back down into the mantle. This process can also create volcanoes. There are also transform boundaries, where two plates slide against each other. This causes earthquakes, which you might be familiar with. And if you're not, if you stay in California, then you will feel earthquakes at some point. Rocks may seem solid and unchanging, but the fact is that they change very slowly over time. Weathering of rocks over time has shaped Earth. This is an example of physical weathering. This rock structure was created by wind blowing sand over time. As the sand blows past this rock, it wears away the softer rock and only the harder rock remains. There are a lot of these rock structures not too far away in Utah in a place called Arches National Park. It's really a great place to visit. Keep it in mind. Visit it someday. This is an example of chemical weathering. This statue has been affected by acid rain, and the chemical structure of the rock has been altered. So weathering can be physical or it can be chemical. It can be the result of wind and wind blowing materials around, or it can be the result of rain and other forms of precipitation. Erosion can break down rocks and move the sediments to new locations. Erosion is where water or wind flows over rock for a long period of time until it wears it away. Erosion is what formed the Grand Canyon as the Colorado River flowed through Arizona. Erosion can break down rocks and move the sediments to new locations. Sediment is the the sand and rock that is broken off of the original material and flows downstream. This process is called deposition, and it creates sedimentary rock. This concept will be continued on the next slide. Sedimentary rock is what we observe. If you look at the arch on the left picture, you can tell that that is sedimentary rock because sedimentary rock forms in layers. Most fossils that we find have been preserved in sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock usually forms when small particles of sand, silt, clay, or lime, muds, settle to the bottom of a river, lake, ocean, or other body of water. Sedimentary rock can also form from compacted desert sands. As sediments build up, they bury dead organisms that have sunk to the bottom. If these remains are buried quickly, they may not be scattered by scavengers. Soft body structures usually decay quickly after death, so only wood, shells, bones, or teeth remain. These hard structures can be preserved if they are saturated or replaced with mineral compounds. Sometimes, however, organisms are buried so quickly that soft tissues are protected from aerobic decay. When this happens, fossils may preserve incredibly detailed imprints of soft-bodied animals and structures like skin or feathers. As layers of sediment build up over time, the remains are buried deeper and deeper. Over many years, pressure gradually compresses the lower layers. This pressure, along with chemical activity, can turn the sediments into rock. Which structures do you think are most likely to become fossilized and why? Hard structures such as shells, bones, or teeth are most likely to become fossilized because hard structures are less susceptible to decay than soft tissues are. What turns layers of sediment into rock? It's the pressure from the sediment building up on top of the layers. So pressure and chemical activity turn sediment to rock.